Our intent is not to stand up here and talk at you guys, so we're going to make our portion very short and then just field any questions that you want and ask us everything. To start off with, my name is Angelique Rude. I'm the regional manager for Idaho Power that covers this area. My only job is to take care of customers. That's it. I get to work in customer operations, so that's my only job, to take care of customers. I oversee our PAD office, our NAMPA office, our Emmett office, which we serve this area out of, and then our Oregon service territory. I've been with the company 16 years. I'm from here. We care about this community too, so just know that when we're thinking about this stuff, we have all of you guys in mind. Jake Perryman is our regional operations manager. He manages our CAD and Emmett office on the operations side. So anytime you see line crews up here, they work for Jake, so call him if you have problems. Jake's also has a place in Lowman. He's up here all the time, so he understands the service territory quite well. He's been with the company 25 years and has a lot of good experience, so give him all the hard questions. And then I also have Danny Rollins in the back. Danny is what we call an energy advisor, and her full-time job is to take questions from customers. So if there's ever something that you need from Idaho Power that you can't get through our call center, she's your gal, and she has business cards back there as well. And thanks, Mayor, for setting this up. We really appreciate it. We wanted to make sure we got out in front of you guys instead of just sending stuff out. So we really wanted the opportunity for you guys to ask whatever questions that you have. I want to start out just by dispelling a few rumors. I had the opportunity to make a lot of the phone calls to customers in this area. I probably spoke to some of you in the room, and I wanted to start by saying that while we sent some postcards, some voice messages out, some things in the public, we do not anticipate you having any outages due to this plan this year or in the future. We just don't. At least based upon what we've seen historically. If we continue to have record drought in the state of Idaho, that picture could change. But based upon the conditions we had last year, so if you take our weather conditions, our moisture, our high temperatures, and we had record heat last summer, we still would never have proactively shut power off. We didn't meet the criteria. Because the criteria does require that it's not only hot and dry, and we're in a drought, but also requires really high winds. So we're talking about winds over 50 miles per hour, which is rare. It's rare to see the high temperatures, the lack of moisture, the drought, and those types of winds. So we're going to go through this in more depth. I just wanted to put that out there first so that you guys understand that we don't anticipate impacting your power unless we continue to see years and years of drought. So let's start by saying that so that we're all on the same page. Jake is going to review our wildfire mitigation plan with you. We do have some maps up throughout the room. Again, Jake has a really good understanding of this area, so he'll be able to kind of describe the zone. But it's probably no surprise to anyone that most of Garden Valley falls into a high wildfire risk zone. The terrain, it's a hard area to serve for a utility company. I mean, getting the wires to your places in some of these more rural communities just creates more challenges. So while we do our very, very best to keep reliability at top of mind, this type of terrain creates some challenges that we're really working hard to address. Another impact we're going to talk a little bit about is some additional work we're doing in this area. Because we've identified Garden Valley as a high fire risk area, we're doing some things to improve reliability. So the good news is that we're spending a lot of money on improvements to our infrastructure. And I know one thing I've heard since I've been in this job in the last 5 years from customers up here is you guys have more power outages than people maybe in Boise have. So we're working hard to fix that. So a lot of the investments that we're putting into the system, because you're in a high wildfire risk zone, should really benefit reliability year-round, not just in fire season. Couple other quick things I wanted to touch on, and then we'll get into this. There's really two parts to our wildfire mitigation plan. The first is identification of high-risk zones, and that drives the work we do. And Jake's going to talk more about that. So, for example, if we had a new business job up here on a day that's 105, and we've had record drought, we might schedule that work early in the morning or later in the evening to avoid the hottest portion of the day. We might also choose to walk the job instead of driving ATVs or vehicles so that we're not sparking fires. So there's different work practices that we'll do in this area because it's in a high fire risk zone. And then the last piece we'll touch on is the public safety power shutoff, which is probably why you're all here, and I'll cover that. But just as we go into this, know that we hope never to have one of those events, and we don't anticipate one up here. So I'll kick it over to Jake, and he's going to talk a little bit about the zones, and then I'll jump back in on the SPS side.
Awesome, thank you, Angelique. So the zone up here, you guys can see at the map when we're done if you haven't already looked at it. The highest fire risk zone is that red colored area up here. It really starts toward Banks at about the old Deer Creek Bridge location there, up through all the way up to Middle Fork to Tide Creek Campground where our service stops, and up the Banks Loman Highway to just past the Chevron is where that red fire zone, our highest risk fire zone, lives. I don't want to confuse you with the zones, but when Angelique talks more about PSPS zone, it's a subset and a portion inside of that red zone. It really starts just north of Crouch, all the way up to Tide Creek Campground up to Middle Fork. Those zones were established using a third party to start with. We had a third party company come in and analyze our entire service territory and take a look at where they thought the highest fire risk zones would be based on population, fuels that were there available, historic wind data, population and structures that could be impacted by fire, and the presence of overhead power line. So we got that data from them. What we did then was take a look at that with boots on the ground with hydropower to come look and validate that data. And we were able to, tweak some zones and tweak some zones just based on kind of geo data they were using. Didn't necessarily make sense if we were looking at wetlands in some areas or areas that may have been underground and now they weren't aware of, things like that. So we took a look at that ourselves, so we didn't just trust a third party, but it was really a great place to start to get somebody else's perspective into what our highest risk fire zones should be. So, like I said, we look at probability of fire in an area causing damage to structures, really that house people. So what would impact you the most with fuel, with the wind speeds and wind direction data that's there, and then formulated those zones. Angelique will talk about how we got to the PSPS zone later, but I wanted to kind of cover high level that red zone fire risk. What we do within those red zones on a daily basis, starting in fire season, which is early in May, we start getting an email at work every day at noon that gives us a red, green, or yellow designator on those areas hour by hour for the coming week. We can have red zones changed by the hour. They can be read by the day. So that's what we use. As Angelique was talking about the potential to have jobs either postponed or moved to a different time of the day, that's what we're using to determine if we come work on overhead power line. If the zone is red but our conditions are yellow or green, we can operate business as usual. And what I will tell you is last year, like she said, we didn't have a day that was red. So we would have operated up here business as usual all year last year. That can obviously change summer to summer, but to put in perspective as to what we saw last year, we wouldn't have had one of these events or a day that had to change our operation because we were in a red scenario. But if we are in that red scenario, you could see some either delays or requested delays in new business work or maintenance or emergency response that we're doing up here. And that's because if power goes out in a red zone on a red day, we have to go, and we choose to go do zone by zone, device by device patrols to be sure we're not re-energizing something that could then start a fire in the most prime condition for a fire to spread. So we have to do some proactive safety patrols to protect all of you and to protect the folks that work for me. I don't want to put them in that situation either. I don't want to be the cause of something that we could have avoided. When we go into a red day, those of you who live up here and do experience power outages, like Angelique said, we do have a place in Loman, and I see some of that too. You've all experienced power going out once, twice, 3 times, and then it stays out. That's an automated device that is intended to to keep us from having a sustained power outage. When we go into a red day, those devices will be set to lock out the first time they trip. So your power will go out, it won't reset 3 times. And that is to avoid sparking fire as that device tries to close back in or re-energize the circuit. If there's a tree laying across it, it could potentially arc and cause a fire. So that in a red day, we could see additional power outages that might have been momentaries to you before. It might require a crew to come here and figure out what's going on and to do patrols before we re-energize. Another thing too I wanted to mention from a reliability perspective, and it will help with some of these sustained outages, especially beyond the fire zone. The main trunk of the feeder that serves this area runs right up the highway past the Chevron and Tuloman. Well, if a device locks out and turns the power off at Banks, all the way up here, all the way to Loman is out. So to come back and do patrols on that, it could be a while for those folks too to get power back on. But we're in the process, and some of you will know really well, of building the new line over Alder Creek from Placerville, from Horseshoe Bend over Placerville and down here. That work will be finished up this summer to have another redundant feed into the valley. So depending on where the outage happens and where we can isolate the outage, that will give us another opportunity to get service restored up in the valley and up in Garden Valley and to Loman more quickly than we could have before by having an alternate feed. Yes, sir.
Should you have to use that way of routing, if we leave our appliances and use that power of our air conditioners, our computers, or that kind of stuff, we leave them on, when you turn that power back on, is it going to cause a surge in our homes to where it might kick out or burn our computers or something like that?
It could.
So you turn them off and we do it, advise us to turn it on and then.
Yes, I would absolutely suggest if you're there, you know the power is going to go out, or if it goes out, turn those devices off until power comes back on, and then let those. Yeah. Another thing I would suggest too is some surge suppression that you get for yourself to plug your devices into that would stop some of that. Say if you were gone somewhere and the power went off and back on, it would help avoid some of those issues with your appliances too.
Will the internet go off at the same time?
It will impact the cell towers, the communication up here. I don't know to what extent.
It kind of depends on who leads you or who serves you, pardon me. So for example, Frontier used to have some backup battery systems. I think they do in some areas, they don't in others. CenturyLink has backup batteries in some areas, they don't in others. There could also be a situation where your power's out because the structure feeding you is, I don't know, that direction, and you get fed this direction so that, I don't know, a car hits a pole, your power's out. That doesn't necessarily mean that whatever is serving that cell phone tower or the internet company is also out. So unfortunately, it just depends.
Is the new power loop, is it underground or is it towers?
No, it's overhead.
It is overhead.
Yes, it is.
So this is nothing to do with power generation.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, the whole Northwest grid is seeing issues, and I could spend hours talking about other states' policies that may have caused some of that, but we are more constrained than we've been in the past, but we have plenty of energy to serve our existing customers. That is not a problem that I can power. We're adding new generation sources all the time, but we have enough capacity to serve all of our existing customers. And when new customers come in, they got to pay to upgrade the system because we're not going to impact our existing customers. Growth has to cover growth. And that's just the way we operate as an Idaho company. So, nope, this is not an issue of a lack of capacity at all. It's really just we've had a lot of years of drought in a row. And as it gets drier, wildfires are more prevalent, and we just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect your community. That's what this comes down to.
And back to the overhead underground question too. A lot of that line is being built under transmission Transmission
Oh, it's
configuration.
yeah, specs.
The spec for transmission, so it's taller, it's wider, and we have wider path of vegetation clear around those to try to avoid issues with that.
If we have solar and we're backfeeding the grid, do we need to be aware of anything? Do we need to shut that down if there's these situations, or is that not related on you?
Now, I think it should come back in and operate as normal. You have auto disconnects, that should all work.
Yeah.
It's supposed to.
Do the power outages go day and night, or more like in the daytime, and we restore power in the night, or like cool off enough to kind of cool off the day where you don't have to use that?
Are you asking if we proactively turn power off?
If you should activate
Yeah.
when it's hot, does the heat go into the night where you have to leave the power off at night also, like 24 hours, 48 hours? Or do you come in here and give us surges of power, or sometime during the night where there
Yeah.
are images and stuff and you generate?
It could be, that's tough to say. I mean, if we think about when do we typically see a summer thunderstorm and windstorm, it's in the evening. So that's typically when you would see us, if we got to a point where we were going to proactively turn it off, it would be ahead of that event. So it would be off at night. We'd be limited on what we can do on a patrol, a safety patrol at night, because we need to visually get our eyes on every piece of that line before we bring it back on. Luckily at night, the humidity rises, temperature drops, and the windstorms dissipate at some point. So I would say, what I would guess would happen if we had a summer evening thunderstorm, if we proactively turn power, power off, it would be off. As temperatures drop, we come out of our red qualification, we can come back in and start patrolling and start working on restoring, but we'd probably be working on that all night long.
So the power would come up for the whole battery, it would come in segments?
It would come in segments, correct. And that really depends on where it goes out, but yes, it would. No matter where it goes out, it could lessen the number of segments we have to patrol, or it could expand those, but it will come on in pieces.
So what you're saying is that if you turn it off, or you can turn it back on, it has to be visually inspected all day?
If we had a storm event. So if we proactively turn it off with a PSPS, because we were expecting 50-mile-an-hour winds and a hot day, if that actually came through, then yes, we're going to visually inspect all of that. If we have a red day, and we have a power outage within that red zone, we will need to inspect. But if we know why it's a blue sky day like today, and a car hits a pole on the highway, we have some flexibility to look at that and say it wasn't a windstorm. We don't suspect any other damage anywhere else that could cause a problem. So we can go through our normal process to look at one device to the next protective device and patrol that and re-energize. So we can decrease the length of outages.
So if a car hits a pole, does the sheriff's office or whatever, they contact Idaho Power and say, hey, the pole's down?
At times, absolutely. Yeah.
Or you might call, right? We have customers call us all the time to say there's wire on the ground. So whoever sees it, we want them to call us. We can get it taken care of as soon as possible.
Or people call because their power's out.
Yeah.
And they don't know what.
Yeah.
So it alerts us pretty quickly that something's going on.
Is there a max period of time, if you guys have a PSPS, that you would cap for how long you would prospectively have the power proactively down? Like you cap it at 48 hours, or has that been discussed?
No, it has. And I wonder if it might be a good time for me to talk a little bit high level about what a PSPS event would look like. And I think it'll answer some of those questions if that's okay. Did you have a question outside of it?
I'm gonna wait till after you talk about your stuff.
Okay, so as Jake mentioned, we do have red conditions that we look at for our wildfire mitigation plan. A PSPS event would only occur, as I mentioned, in the most extreme circumstances. So all of those other conditions Jake talked about would have to be present, and then we do have to have extremely high winds for that to ever occur. And again, historically in this area, we have not seen high winds to that level on the same days that we had the high heat and dry conditions. So we don't expect this to happen, but let's talk about what it would look like if we did. So first and foremost, our job as a utility is to try to provide as much notification to your customers as possible if we were ever considering a PSPS event. We have full-time meteorologists on staff, we have 4 of them, that run those models that Jake mentioned every single day. Wind, we can usually predict about 2 to 4 days out. So the second we became aware that we were expecting winds over that 50 mile an hour, plus the heat, plus the drought conditions, that's when we're going to start notifications. So you could be notified that a PSPS event is possible 3 or 4 days ahead of the events. We'd obviously notify your mayor, your commissioners, your emergency managers, the fire districts and police departments so they can be ready in case an event happens. But all of you will also, who live in the zone, get a notification. It'll come via text if you have a mobile phone number on file with us. It'll come via voice message if you have a landline. And then if you have an email set up, you'll also get an email. We'll be notifying you guys at least every 12 hours of whether or not that event still looks like it's going to happen. So you'll have plenty of advance notice. That's also where we'd be working with your mayor and your emergency manager to set up a, maybe it's this building, I don't know, somewhere that you guys would want to have potential battery backups for people who need to charge items, perhaps water or other services. So we'd be working locally to make sure you have the services you need if the power is out for an extended period of time. The other thing that we would be doing is talking to your local fire district. What are they seeing? What are their thoughts? Do they feel like the conditions are what we think they are? So we don't take this decision lightly. We're going to involve your whole community as we're trying to make a good decision about whether or not to de-energize power. If we ended up in a situation where we do have to de-energize, for this area, if we had to patrol the entire thing during daylight hours, and we would predict about a 12-hour outage. So that's what you could kind of think about if there's no damage. Here's the thing I'll tell you though, if we have 55, 60 mile an hour winds up here, there's going to be damage regardless of this PSPS event. So I'm not saying that the max time an outage could occur to be 12 hours, because if Jake's crews have to come up here and fix 25 poles, power could be out for a while for some customers. But to answer your question, in terms of the length of the PSPS event, it's going to be the length of the wind event plus the patrol time. And we think that would likely be somewhere between 12 and 16 hours. So we are not talking about the California outages that last 3 or 4 days. That is not what we're looking at. I want to make that so clear. We have plans in place. So if we thought this event was coming, Jake would already have linemen staged up here and ready to go. So they'd be sitting here waiting. And the second we get the okay to re-energize, those guys are out there. And I promise you, nothing matters more to our linemen than getting your power back on. And hopefully you've experienced that in the past, but that's why they grew up to become linemen. They wanted to come restore your power. Once we decide to de-energize, we're going to send you a notification and let you know how long we think the power is going to be out. So the same notification methods, if you have a mobile phone, you'll get a text. If you have a landline, you'll get a voice message. We'll also have our customer service center available 24 hours a day, so they'll be ready to take any phone calls you have. Jake has equipment stored up here, so we'll have fuses and some other pieces of equipment ready and stored so that we can restore power as quickly as possible. That's what we do for a living, and that's what our line crews are here for. So we would be doing everything we could to get power back on as soon as possible. Again, we don't think we'll have one of these events, but we did want you to understand what the communication would look like if an event were to occur. As I mentioned before, we'd also be partnering with your mayor, local emergency manager, and the sheriff's offices. And their job would be to send out, if you're signed up for AlertSense, I don't know if anybody in here is signed up for AlertSense or any of the state alert systems, but you are eligible for state alert systems. So you might get a notification from Idaho Power, and then you might also get a notification from your county, because we'll be working together to make sure everybody gets what they need. In terms of how we would restore power, and Jake, jump in here anytime, but as you mentioned, as we're patrolling, we're going to be re-energizing. And so as we get through that feeder, some customers may come on sooner than other customers. If we know that we have a particular location that's impacted, maybe it's the mustering station, we don't have a hospital in your zone, but if there's specific locations that we want to re-energize first to provide city services, we're going to try to get those sites on first. So our patrol plan has considered any of our critical facilities. So across this area, we've identified any critical facility that provides telecommunications, water, fire, or any other emergency service. And we'll be working to restore those services first as part of our patrol plan. I know Terrace Lakes has a water system that there's some concern about. So that's an area that we're going to focus our crews on. Let's go patrol that area to get that back on as quickly as possible. that is part of the plan, but if you have other feedback on things that we should be thinking about during our patrol or restoration, that's why we're here, that's what we want to hear about. So, high level, that's the way a PSPS would work. Again, we're not talking about days, we're talking about hours, but likely with 50, 60 mile an hour winds, we got some work to do, some rebuilding to do. Yeah, please.
So just to clarify, to make sure I understood what you said, in the unlikely event of a PSPS event, the time clock, when it would go off, would start after the wind subsided below your 50 mile an hour mark. And at that point, I heard two things. Number one, I heard it would be 12 hours of visual inspection, but I also heard 12 to 16. So can you clarify exactly what the number is so you can expect that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've assumed that 4 guys patrol, 4 linemen patrol. So with 4 linemen patrolling the entire feeder, that would be about 12 hours of time to restore. Wind events up here historically, so we did a 10-year look back at winds with our meteorologists, and we had them look at different wind patterns. That's why I have pretty good confidence that we would take a very different type of wind pattern than we've seen in the past. So over the last 10 years, the most sustained winds we've ever seen in this area that would be over our threshold would be 4 hours. So I'm trying to give us a little wiggle room to say the patrol's taking 12 hours, the wind patterns in the last 10 years, the worst we've ever seen have been a total of 4 hours, giving us a 16. Now the other caveat to that, though, as Jake mentioned, is we're not as effective patrolling at night. We're not going to go home, trust me, we'll be out here working, but it may take a little bit longer if the outage were to start at 8 o'clock at night than if it starts at noon. So that's why we give the wiggle room on that 12 to 16, but thanks for clarifying. I'm going to get this question and I'll come back.
What can we do in our landscape that will help if there is anything?
Yeah, I would suggest working with your city and your local fire department on what they provide, but what we always suggest is in hot months, if there is a fire approaching, try to keep at least the areas directly around your house wet with as much moisture as possible. We do have some tips directly from BLM and the Forest Service on our website, and then at the back we have another document about preparing for outages that may help. We're not necessarily the fire prevention experts, but as we've worked with our partners, that's what they would suggest, is keeping the area directly around any dwellings as wet as possible in that circumstance.
Yeah, I live up on Terrace Lakes, and I know you have a project going on up there. How long is that going to last? Do you expect any outages?
I believe that might be our underground cable replacement maybe.
Yeah.
Talk about that after.
Yeah, if they're doing cable replacement up there, I'm not sure. When did it start?
Like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't know how extensive it is, how long a project it is. It may create some short outages, just as what they're doing is taking old direct underground buried cable that was buried directly in the ground, and they're putting that new cable in and in conduit. So it's more reliable going forward. We can service shorter pieces of it going forward. It may create some shorter outages as they cut over from that old cable to the new cable, but it won't be sustained like we're talking with these. It'll be short maintenance outages for 2 or 3 hours maybe.
In the heat of the summer, we really try to keep any planned outage below 4 hours. That's really important to us. We know people need their services when it's hot, so I wouldn't anticipate any outage over 4 hours for planned maintenance.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of the problems are due to above ground power lines causes these issues. Is there any reason that we're not burying more? I'm sure it's pretty expensive due to just the geography and the rocks and everything. But
Yeah, it is. And overhead power lines are safe. That's, like Angelique said, we are up here doing some maintenance to those to make them less prone to arc or spark. But they're safe, but they are expensive to bury. So who knows what may come in the future with new development, new services. Maybe that's an opportunity to go, from here on, go underground and then start working as to how can we go back. The issue with that is if we go back and just take everything underground, then it goes back and everybody gets to pay for that. And with that escalated cost, we're respectful of that too. We don't want to provide upward rate pressure for everybody to have to pay that back. We can mitigate it some other way. So we are thinking about that. In some way we can step through that to try to make it make sense. And, you know, if we can start to shrink some zones and identify some areas that are higher importance to underground first, and just how do we prioritize that? We are working on that.
For what it's worth, it's about 4 times more expensive to underground a power line than it is to build it overhead. And the challenge for us is always balancing rates with reliability and safety. And so where it makes sense to do so, we absolutely will consider it. And as we get new business requests, we're going to encourage customers to look at doing so. But that's such a tough conversation because we are.
And there's a direct financial impact too to each customer that's served overhead. If we come in underground, then you'd be required to change your meter base from overhead to underground, and you'd have some expense to an electrician. And so for us just to come say you have to do that necessarily, I don't know if that's the right approach either. So we're trying to figure out what's the right way to step into that and try to work that way, just mindfully.
I recently heard vague information on a very large federal program that was not just related to fires and that kind of thing, but it included fire prevention dollars. I guess my question here is, I mean, we brought in a cherry picker and limbed up all our trees so that we've got, you know, good fire protection, and we've done a lot of that work, you know, maybe not as much as I'd like to, but pretty good. But I know that it's an expense that not everybody can fit into the budget all the time. Are there, and my frustration in even spending that money is I look at the lot next door, which is just an open lot, there's nothing built there, and that there is so much overgrowth. And heck, I'd get my chainsaw out and go over there and start trimming things up, but I don't even really know the people, so I think that might be a problem. But the reality is that, you know, what we're talking about here is a fire risk. I mean, that's why this whole thing is in place. And my concern is that we've got an awful lot of properties that are overgrown, and a lot of people that either physically or financially or for whatever reason can't or aren't, you know, trying to make those efforts. You know, I did hear about this program that sounded like there was a lot of money going towards it for helping people with that kind of thing. I doubt anybody in this room is just doesn't give a rip about fires, but they, you know, for whatever reason, they haven't or can't get it done. What programs are available that can assist people in that kind of thing, or if any?
There are programs. Some of those programs are tricky in essence of how you receive the funds. So I'll give you a couple of examples of programs that I'm aware of. Since we started our wildfire mitigation plan, we've been working really closely with FEMA, Idaho Office of Emergency Management, Department of Lands and BLM on this exact topic, because we know that there are many customers that we have that would love to do exactly what you described, but don't have the resources to do it. There is county funding available through the state and through the feds to do that. We can't request, we tried, we can't request those funds on the behalf of the community. Your county emergency manager can, and your regional fire district can. And I don't know if anybody's here from fire, but I think that's a great community conversation for you to have. And if there is a way for us to support, I'll give you an example. We just, with one of our Oregon communities, helped them submit a grant. So we helped write the grant request for them that could go then to the state to get them funding. But we can't submit the request on your behalf. We can help with support, and in some cases, for example, if there's a generator need or something like that, we'll partner with you. Those funds, though, the infrastructure and wildfire reduction funds, all get funneled through the state and go to the counties. So I would really encourage you guys to have those conversations about how you could get funds into Boise County for things of that nature. And your county emergency manager or your fire district would be, I think, where to start. We actually tried up here to look at if it was possible for us to submit a grant request for a generator for a water system. And we're told, no, it has to go through the county. So our hands are a little tied on that piece. But I do know that there are funds available, and I know of counties that are attaining funds for fire suppression purposes. And if there's something this community is passionate about, and you just need help submitting the paperwork, writing the grant request, getting a letter of support saying why this is important for this community, that's what we're all about. However we can partner, that's what we're here for. But unfortunately, yeah, we all through the county. Any other questions? Yeah.
Your meteorologists work just for that?
Full time.
So they don't work for the TV stations?
No.
Good, and then where are you laughing?
We like to brag that we think we have some of the best meteorologists in the country, but you have to remember also, we're a hydro-based utility, and so knowing how much water is going to be in those reservoirs is absolutely core to providing you that service I told you we have plenty of capacity for. So we have exceptional meteorologists. Yeah.
Are there particular areas in your analysis that you did in the high-risk areas, maybe particular spots that you guys geotagged that would be, that we should address directly, like thin this area out as soon as you can, or this area, this area? Is there any kind of low-hanging fruit we could kind of, at least to reduce risk a little bit right now that you guys have identified?
We are installing additional SGMs and additional weather monitoring stations. There's some really cool technology that's coming out because of wildfire. For example, one of the technologies, and I'm not saying that we'll do this, there's some downsides to it as well, but there's new technology that will sense smoke and actually send a drone out to take pictures so we know exactly where that event is occurring. We don't have that type of technology yet, but we do have weather stations that we're installing that will help us in some ways. And some of those weather stations will detect smoke. Now we still got to send someone to take care of it, notify the appropriate agencies, but we are looking all the time at new technology. Some of the infrastructure money that's available also we're eligible for technology related to wildfire, so we're absolutely looking at other things that we can install and take care of. Also, on a every other year basis, we have a lineman, a very experienced lineman, we call them patrolmen, so our most experienced linemen that walk or ride every single foot of our lines in these wildfire risk zones, and as they identify hazards, we deal with those within 30 days. So we do have boots on the ground, ensuring that the system looks like it's in good shape. We just did our patrol this last summer for this area, and that's one of the reasons you're seeing so many tree trimmers up here, because we identified a lot of tree issues that we hadn't taken care of yet, and so you'll see more and more of that. The tree trimming department doesn't report into our group, but if you ever have issues or questions or concerns, we will help you resolve those. So make sure you get a business card before you leave. I know there's some frustration with some of the debris and that sort of thing. We will take care of that if we hear about it. So I think I answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then one more.
Yeah.
Was this project initiated by Idaho Power, or did this come down from like any sort of federal program or request to?
We did this.
You guys initiated?
Yeah, I will say that Oregon has some legislation around wildfire. Idaho Power, of our 600,000 customers, has 20,000 customers in Oregon, so it's a very small footprint for us. They do have wildfire legislation. Idaho does not. We did this because we think it's the right thing to do.
Well, California is, the utilities down there are in deep kimchi because they didn't get proactive. And now they're basically bankrupt because of all the problems. So I applaud the fact that you guys are getting after it before we do have a big problem.
Well, it's the drought the drought conditions have had us rethinking the way we operate. We just haven't experienced those type of drought conditions with these number of structures, right? So, 20 years ago, we had our last drought, which wasn't the same as last year's drought. Last year's a record drought for us in most of our service territory. There weren't the same number of houses everywhere, right? I mean, you didn't have that same urban interface that we have now. So the world has changed also. Yeah.
I know you're not in fire protection, but with News Garden Valley, where is the fire, evacuation around here? Is it right here in town? Is it over in the park?
Mayor, can I ask, do you know the answer to that question?
What was it, sorry? Fire evacuation route?
We're still working with our emergency services on specifying that. We've had a couple seats changed on city council. So we're working with the Boise County Emergency Services person and setting some things up that will come hopefully soon to kind of create some information to go out to people about where to go with it and whatever it's necessary.
Once that is identified, what we would do in our messaging, so if we said, yeah, this event might be coming, so let's just use the PSPS event, in our messaging we'll include that location so that you have that. One other thing I'll add is that I've talked a lot about PSPS communication. We don't expect a PSPS event, but everyone in this room, I bet, has experienced some outages in this area. There are a few new tools that we have that I really want to make sure you know about. So one is anyone in here signed up for outage alerts? So you get a text or a voice message or, okay, so more than half. One feature we just added this last month is you can now add multiple contacts for that outage alert. So I'll tell you how I use that in a couple different ways. My husband's a dairy farmer. We get notifications at the farm. Both of us get them, so we know what's happening. But more importantly for you guys in an area like this, my folks, I have a dad who's on a CPAP machine. I need to know if he doesn't have power. They live in a PSPS zone in Cascade. You can sign up multiple people to get those alerts. So for my dad, he's going to get a voice message on his landline saying your power is going to be out. I'm also going to get a text alert from my dad's house so that I can make sure somebody is up there to help him if I can't be. So if you have loved ones that might need extra help during a power outage, or if you might need extra help during a power outage, please sign up a secondary person for outage alerts so that someone that knows that you need help can get a text alert also. That's a really cool feature that we just added this last month, and I think it's a big deal. It's a big deal for my family, so it might be a big deal for your families also.
Can you sign up for that online?
Yeah. Yep, you just go to my account and we'll get that taken care of. If you can't, if the internet's not your thing, you can also call our call center and they'll take care of that for you. What other questions? You had a question, I think.
You answered it. It was on the notification time.
Perfect, yeah. Our goal is to always notify at least 24 hours in advance, but we'll try to notify 3 days in advance is our goal.
One more question.
Yes, please.
You've been pretty specific about the wind speed being 50 miles per hour. Is that a wind event with sustained winds of 50 miles per hour or gusts?
Okay, let's talk winds, because this is not a black and white answer. Okay, the wind speeds aren't for all of our service territory. We had professionals, including internal and external people, come in and look at our structures, the type of structures we have, the terrain that we have, and then we'll also look at vegetation. I use 50 miles an hour because across our entire service territory, we don't have any areas that I believe we would de-energize at less than 50 miles per hour. Every area is going to be slightly different. Areas up here could be slightly different. The transmission system that Jake just mentioned, that's going to hold up really well against winds. Those thresholds could be much higher than a distribution system at Terrace Lakes that has a lot of trees right around it. So 50 miles is kind of the lower end of the threshold. And in some situations, it might be much higher based upon the type of structure that it is. Drought matters too. Vegetation matters also. So that number may fluctuate. Now, we're really lucky because we got a lot of rain the last 2 months. Going into wildfire season, that we got a lot of rain the last 2 months. When I was talking to your mayor 3 months ago, I was telling him this is going to be a bad summer and I'm really worried. I'm not that worried any longer because of the water that we've gotten. If we get into October and we have vegetation, as tall as me and it's dry, it might be lower than 50 mile an hour threshold. So we're continuing to assess and evaluate, but 50 is kind of the bottom.
But whatever it is, it could be a projected gust or sustained.
Oh, thank you for answering the
it could be either one.
Okay.
Generally speaking, we're more concerned with sustaining because our focus was dust, power out, done, we go fix it. The sustained winds generally cause enough damage that we worry about something laying hot on the ground. Yes?
On your map, there's some different colored coding for different power lines. What does that mean? Like when primary heat, over into the primary heat. What does that mean?
I need to apologize. Those maps are terrible. And I'm just going to be completely transparent. I picked them up and I didn't even open them until we got up here. And I'm like, oh no, these are not great maps to put on this wall. So
well, the color of the line doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything to you. So the only thing that we want you to care about on that map is whether or not you're in a red or a purple zone. So the large red section is the red, although they cut a portion of it off at the bottom. The purple section is the section that could be eligible for a public safety power shutoff. And that's the little dotted purple line in the inside of that red zone on the maps. And then if you got a handout, if you didn't, I can get you one, That, the purple zone is detailed there. We don't have the whole red zone on that map. That's just the area that would be prone, could be a potential PSPS zone. I'm sorry for the maps, yeah, we'll do better.
You ran out of that handout of maps. Is it on the website?
It is on the website, but I'm also happy to either deliver or mail one to you. So if you want us to, just let Danny know and we'll take care of that for you. Any other questions? I appreciate so much you guys showing up to have this conversation with us. This means a lot to us that you took the time to come out and have this conversation. If there are any questions you didn't get a chance to ask, we're all going to hang out for a little while, so come see us. And we just want you to know our job is to serve you, and we'll continue to try to do that best we can. So thanks for your time.
Yes, thank you.